Hi, this is Mark Laughlin speaking for the Ambidextrous Gunfighter. Now, we usually cover gun stuff, but I often talk about opportunity cost. Like, do you get more guns or do you improve your IFAK, your individual first aid kit? Do you get more guns or do you get an AED? Or do you get more guns or do you get an EMP shield? Now, as I've expressed before, I've got a weakness for guns and I tend to neglect a lot of these other things that really make more sense in favor of guns. And I try to justify it by saying, well, I'm doing reviews for it, so, video stuff. But EMP shield. Now, guns. Why do we have guns? One is to deal with crime and tyranny. And, so what's the crime rate in your area? What's the tyranny rate in your area? Individual first aid kit. Injuries. It's for injuries. What is the likelihood that you or someone in your family will suffer an injury or trauma? So that's something, definitely an IFAK is something you want to have on hand. Fire extinguishers are the same way. What's the risk of a fire? It's pretty low for most people, but the consequences are pretty high. So most people have some fire extinguishers throughout their house. We have quite a few. AED, electronic defibrillator. That's for heart attacks. So what is your fitness level? What is your family history for heart attacks? So what's your risk for heart attacks? Should you have an AED instead of some more guns? Probably for most people, especially Americans, they probably should have an AED. But the EMP shield, okay, what is this? What is this to protect you from? An EMP or a GMD, Geomagnetic Disturbance. So what is an EMP? Well, from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Strategy for Protecting and Preparing the Homeland Against Threats of Electromagnetic Pulse and Geomagnetic Disturbances. EMP means an electromagnetic pulse caused by a nuclear device or non-nuclear device, including such a pulse caused by an act of terrorism. A nuclear electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, is a burst of electromagnetic gamma radiation created by a nuclear explosion that produces rapidly changing electric and magnetic fields. Given the potential impacts on critical infrastructure that may occur when these fields couple with electrical and electronic systems over a large geographic range, an EMP are the primary EMP concern for the nation's homeland security. Nuclear EMP attack scenarios and combined arms cyber warfare by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. This new way of warfare is called many things by many nations. In Russia, China, and Iran, it is called sixth generational warfare, non-contact warfare, electronic warfare, total information warfare, and cyber warfare. Some U.S. analysts, the very small number paying attention, call it Cybergeddon, blackout war, or combined arms cyber warfare. Ignorance of the military doctrines of potential adversaries and a failure of U.S. strategic imagination, as noted in military writings of potentially hostile powers, is setting America up for an EMP Pearl Harbor. Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran appear to regard nuclear EMP attack as the ultimate weapon in an all-out cyber operation aimed at defeating U.S. and Allied military forces on the battlefield and in a theater of operations. They also see EMP and combined arms cyber warfare as a means of defeating entire nations by blacking out their electric grids and other critical infrastructure for longer periods of time than technologically developed societies, including the U.S., can tolerate without major disruption and loss of life. Electromagnetic pulse EMP attack is technically and operationally the easiest, least risky, and most effective use of a nuclear weapon available to a nuclear-armed state or non-state actor. According to the Congressional EMP Commission Executive Report from 2004, the end of the Cold War relaxed the discipline for achieving EMP survivability within the Department of Defense and gave rise to the perception that an erosion of EMP survivability of military forces was an acceptable risk. EMP simulation and test facilities have been mothballed or dismantled, and research concerning EMP phenomenon, hardening, design, testing, and maintenance has been substantially decreased. However, the emerging threat environment, characterized by a wide spectrum of actors that include near peers, established nuclear powers, rogue nations, subnational groups, and terrorist organizations that either now have access to nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles or may have such access over the next 15 years, have combined to place the risk of EMP attack and adverse consequences on the U.S. to a level that is not acceptable. Modern electronics are over 1 million times more vulnerable to EMP than the electronics of 1962. The Congressional EMP Commission estimates that an EMP attack causing a protracted nationwide blackout lasting 1 year could kill up to 90% of the American people through starvation and societal collapse. Be sure and check out the January 2021 report by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, Executive Director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security. It's called The Russia EMP Threat, the Russian Federation's Military Doctrine, Plans, and Capabilities for Electromagnetic Pulse EMP Attack. The report states Russia has super EMP weapons specialized for HEMP attack, high altitude EMP attack, that potentially generate 100,000 volts per meter or higher, greatly exceeding the U.S. military hardening standard of 50,000 volts per meter. Okay, so there's clearly a risk, a threat of an EMP attack. Some things I highly suggest you look at to consider the Golitsyn one-clenched fist hypothesis. Check out Trevor Love's summary. I'll include a link down below on Golitsyn. Also, check out J.R. Nyquist's Origins of the Fourth World War. I'll include a link where you can get a copy of that book. Now, despite this alleged Sino-Soviet one-clenched fist threat, as long as the USA has Biden and Harris as our commander-in-chief, I really don't expect our enemies to find it necessary to do any kind of military attack on the United States. As long as we're on this, path to communism or collapse. And so at this point, I estimate there's a pretty low probability of an EMP attack on the United States. However, giving the Earth's waning magnetic field a geomagnetic disturbance could prove to be a global technological reset. Ben Davison of Suspicious Observers estimates that there is a significant possibility of a disastrous geomagnetic disturbance, possibly within solar cycle 25, which we just started. The Next End of the World, The Rebirth of Catastrophism by Ben Davison. Our technological way of life will not be sustainable when the field drops below a certain level. Literally, any event in the solar wind would induce tremendous ground currents and atmospheric changes. The global power grids will be lost, and then that means no heat, AC, gasoline, ATM, phone, water, refrigeration, etc. No stores, no banks, no government, no police, no 911, no hospital facilities. It's just you and everyone else, hungry, thirsty, trying to survive, practicing for the real test to come from the sun and the earth. Is that when the field is 50% down, 60%, 75%? Nobody knows. But it largely depends on solar activity. It is definitely well before we actually hit the magnetic minimum. If Earth took the same level storm today as the 5 or 6 largest of the 1900s, we could already see continents go dark due to the weaker protection of the planetary magnetism. If the sun does very little, it could still be years away to a few decades away. U.S. Department of Homeland Security's strategy for protecting and preparing the homeland against threats of electromagnetic pulse and geomagnetic disturbances. Geomagnetic disturbance, GMD. The term GMD refers to a geomagnetic disturbance caused by a solar storm or other naturally occurring phenomenon. GMDs are caused by space weather events originating on the sun, naturally occurring sudden burst of plasma and magnetic field structures, coronal mass ejection, CME, and bursts of radiation or solar flares. These events tend to occur during the sun's solar maximum, a 4 to 6 year period during the sun's regular cycle of reversing the polarities of its north and south poles. The strongest geomagnetic storm on record is the Carrington event of 1859, which electrified telegraph lines. The event caused major outages and disruptions in telegraph networks around the world. Currents induced in the lines by the event were strong enough to cause sparks and allow some operators to disconnect their systems from batteries and send messages using only the current induced by the storm. Impacts from the storm were limited given the state of technology at the time. Modern society is far more vulnerable to the effects of a significant GMD event due to its reliance on electricity and technology. A more recent significant event occurred in 1989 when a geomagnetic storm collapsed the Hydro-Quebec power grid in under 2 minutes, resulting in the loss of electric power to more than 6 million people for 9 hours in Canada. So far, we are just talking about like a coronal mass ejection or a solar flare induced geomagnetic disturbance that takes out the power grid. There is quite possibly an even worse global cataclysm to follow, and it's overdue. I highly suggest checking out, for starters, to pursue in that more cataclysmic direction. Check out World in Peril, which really starts out as this kind of Ernest Shackleton type story of survival in the Arctic, but gets into some discoveries they made in the Arctic. Also check out Ben Davidson's The Next End of the World. This goes into basically takes what we learn about in World in Peril and the hypothesis on how the things that they found. I'm not going to explain it all here because you're going to have to go check it out, and I'll include links below. You can actually read World in Peril online for free, so you can check on it just after you watch this video. But The Next End of the World basically gives more of the explanation as to how the hypothesis proposed in World in Peril, how that might happen, and is overdue on the 12,000 year cycle. Also check out Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, The True Origins of Species. I'll include a link below. And also there's an older version kind of about the same time that World in Peril came out called The Adam and Eve Story. And you can check that out online as well. Link down below. So what can you do to protect you and yourself from an EMP or a geomagnetic disturbance threat? something you can do right now is download the Suspicious Observers Disaster Prediction app. It's available on Android and iOS. Links down below. The next video in this series will outline how to protect the motive power of your bug-out vehicle with EMP Shield. It's Mark Laughlin speaking for the Ambidextrous Gunfighter. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.